afternoon, and good morning. Welcome back to another episode of the Discord Discussions. This week, we only have older gentlemen. We have early 40s and late 40s. But today, we're going to discuss two things that each of us learned that was profound. One from our 20s that changed how we behave, and two we learned after 40 that changed significantly how we behaved. So I'm going to go and start with what I learned in my 20s that was profound. And one of the things that I would say in my 20s that really made a difference to me was that work ethic matters. That showing up early, staying late, and doing more than everyone else to going the extra 10 feet, doing what no one else would be willing to do, had such a profound increase in my income. I at 23, when I first got in the car business, I was meh at it, and I was late all the time, and I didn't really work that hard at my job. I thought it'd be easy because, like, I'm a car guy, da 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 da. But I was making no money, and then I had a gentleman really influence me, and he said, take pride in your job. You know, you need to do this more effectively, and I started becoming interested in my success, and in being better than the guys that were around me. And it was such a galactic improvement. I went from making $1,200 a month to 7 to 10,000. I mean, it was just such an absurd improvement just by being the first guy there and the last guy to leave. And it's that 10%, being 10% better than the people around you. They talk about this, and Chris, you might, or ML, you might be able to expound on it a little bit more about being 10% better than the people around you, at least from a factual point of view. I don't really know the data on it.
Well, just like I can speak for
You're streaming
myself
your
in
screen,
terms
by
of,
the way, and not
yeah,
your
because
camera.
my camera for some reason isn't, but I'm recording using OBS. I'm
Uh,
recording my
Audio. Okay.
actually I can bring it up now. You can see what I'm recording. So my face is going to show in here, and then it's blah blah blah.
It's all good, man.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll make it work. Um, yeah, I mean, I can speak for like World of Warships was where I actually first just started like I needed it just ironically enough it started just because I was trying not to be arrogant and I was trying to find a phrase that would neutrally objectively and not arrogantly describe my skill level at the game and I just came to well better than average and yeah you can rephrase that as just do more than the other guy and yeah if you start I know like at my current job as soon as I started at that job I was um, looking like the metrics that we were judged that all of us were judged by were available to all of us. So I could see how hard my coworkers were working in terms of their output. And I just always made sure that my output was more than theirs. And I got promoted. So
And
yeah, it kind of goes with it. I mean, I think that if you have that as um, a basic heuristic, a basic rule or algorithm to work off of. Just like whatever the average is at your workplace, do more than that. Yeah, yeah, that it's amazing
it's
how much
10%. Peterson
it's
talks
amazing how
about it.
much that's going to get you ahead. Yeah.
What about you, legit?
My 20s, huh?
Yeah.
I would say the most profound thing that I came across in my 20s is that not all areas that you choose to live in are of equal opportunity instances. For example, like, you might not be able to get a job doing whatever you want to do. And even if you can drive a distance, say 45 minutes in the morning, which is standard for what I did downstate, driving up here for 45 minutes in the morning would take me eons away from where I'm at, at 70 miles an hour if I wanted to. And you just don't get the same kind of opportunities that you would if you were living in a big city. And that really changed how everything kind of flowed for my marriage, my children, our lifestyle. I just kind of figured since I grew up downstate, and yeah, I'd been coming up here a long time, that it would be something that, we could ease into and it would be great. Our family would have a good time, and it was actually quite the opposite. Work was scarce, and it really depends when you're starting out early in life. You really should consider a different prospect of being able to be financially secure with having a small family. I was a wife and two kids when I moved up here, and I had another kid while I was up here. And had I made different decisions about location when we initially started off, we would have been more financially stable. So that was a big thing for me. I wasn't a well-off family, but my father owned a business, and I knew what was going on. And then when I turned 40, I kind of realized the exact opposite end of that. That uh, money really isn't everything in life. It helps, it really does, but happiness doesn't always come from being financially secure. So
What about you, ML? And it's a quite valid
Um,
point that he makes.
oh yeah, I to add to what you were saying about I just wrote it down. Like regions differ in terms of job opportunities, and away from the city, there are far less opportunities, and and yeah, that's so not like that's getting with telecommuting, with work from home taking a big leap forward due to COVID. That is rapidly changing, and what I'm hoping for the future, like so many people live in the city not because they like city life, but because that's where the opportunities are. And
exactly.
yeah, and I think that we're going to be entering a better future where, internet is everywhere, including in the country. So you can live on a farm, have broadband internet, and you can, you know, get your education virtually online. And you can, if you want to get a tech job, you can get it, and you'll just be working from your home office. And like the upside to that is that the people who, like myself, who are only in the city because that's where the opportunity is, we can get out of the city. Because I don't like fundamentally, I don't think that um, every human being is designed for city living. Some people really flourish in cities, but I don't think it's even close to 50%.
Well,
I mean, it
No.
certainly isn't me.
to expand on what ML and Legit were saying, you guys also want to consider the fact that when you're in the city, the the difference of social indoctrination is different. When you've got the vast majority, at least in the United States, the larger cities are just
Well, yeah, it's like
dominated
growing. It's like
by
growing up in the city
yeah, growing up in
versus
the country,
moving to the city. Yeah, versus growing up in the country and moving to the city for work. Yeah,
right? Culture shock
if you
from
live
hell.
in this city, oh my goodness, yeah, you're gonna be absolute. The cities are just ultra leftist. I mean,
Well,
even in the country, this like the cities tend to be where the liberals are.
and so I think there might be a negative in the idea of, oh yeah, if we can all work from home, we can live in the country and not go to the city, and everybody will be better. No, you'll have a concentrated area of crazy. Look at Portland; it is literally falling apart. Walmart took
Oh
all
yeah,
their
but
business out of there. Like, so
is that really such a like? Okay, so I have to be careful how I phrase that. Like in the short term, we're seeing a lot of chaos in Portland. Yes. Um,
I think the
but
city falls.
okay, yeah. But so here's the thing: if the only thing that was keeping Portland together was its hardworking conservative elements, and they all just get disgusted by Portland, and they're like, you know what, we're not
Well,
doing this
there's
anymore,
counties
and they
leaving the
and they
state.
leave, yeah, and they leave, and the remains of Portland cannot be socially like coherent and morally coherent enough to even have a functional city, and the city just like disintegrates and falls apart.
San Francisco's doing that right now. They're
Well,
literally falling apart.
Detroit's kind of done it. I mean, and
Yeah.
Chicago's kind of doing it too. Not to be unsympathetic to the people who are caught sometimes in the literal crossfires of that disintegration. I will always be sympathetic and empathetic to individual people caught up in these massive changing social systems. It's not their fault. Like, it's not their fault, so I'm not blaming them. But in the larger scale, I'm asking, well, is that really such a bad thing? I mean, I think it's kind of like it's like a bit of tough love.
You get what you sow. You get what you sow, right? You reap what you sow.
Well, yeah, and it feels like to me you have these people like Portland's a great example where so you just now I'm not
let it
claiming this is
happen,
the
kind
way,
of thing.
well, yeah. So okay, I'm not claiming this is how it is. I'm just as a thought experiment. Just assume, give me credit, just give me benefit of the doubt for a moment, and just assume that I've encapsulated Portland in these words. Let's assume that, and this is very low resolution, that Portland has roughly two camps of people living within it. They've got the conscientious, hardworking, conservative business stereotypes, and they've got these ultra leftist / anarchist and Tifa communist anti-capitalist types, and you have this city that's functioning well enough that it's actually got like a major tourism business, and most people who visit it come away thinking the city is really wonderful. My parents still think it's really wonderful because they only follow CNN, and CNN doesn't report on the problems in Portland. And when they go and visit it, they only stay in the nice parts that aren't affected, like not in the downtown core that got the Chaz in it, right? So, if the like, that's great that that city was kind of working that way, but it feels to me like it's being done on the backs of those ethical, hardworking, conscientious, conservative business types. Because if it was truly an equal, like if everybody was, if everyone was giving value to the city through their actions in some way or form, however they were doing it, and it was roughly equal, then if all the conservatives pull out of Portland, then it shouldn't collapse. It'll just change in terms of its voting demographics and maybe a bit in terms of like its business makeup. But the city still should be able to function because all the people who are remaining are contributing value. But I think
that's not happening.
Yeah, and so I think what was actually happening, yes, I think what was actually happening was you had one side, the conservatives side, and again, I'm using these are just the roughest of definitions. The conservative side was giving more than their fair share. They were doing more than the average to keep that city coherent and functioning smoothly enough that tourists think it's awesome. Take them away, and then that exposes the true value. Well, yeah, it's like the people that are remaining are all the leftists. Now it's only your ideas. It's only your ideas and only your ideology left. There is no counter pressure from your ideological opposition, the conservatives. They're gone. So now you get to run the city the way you want, according to your principles, unopposed. Boom! Chaos, murder, anarchy. All the businesses leave, and it's like, oh, okay. So from that, I am going to induce. One could argue, deduce that you and your values are incoherent, socially toxic, and economically devastating. And the only reason that wasn't exposed for all to see was because the conservatives were covering it up with with their hard work, and they were just like, oh, for Pete's sake, okay, clean the sidewalk again, replace the
Yeah.
big glass storefront again, just keep everything tidy because the tourists are coming, and that it's a very conservative impulse. And with that gone, now it's just chaos and the thing falls apart. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I think the greater benefit to all of us, like, is to see that that ideology, that radical leftist ideology, that anarchist Antifa ideology, when given free reign, when allowed to actually do whatever it wants with no courts or police involved, basically becoming their own mini country. What was it like in that country? Oh, it was hot dog shit. It made Venezuela look good.
Well, let's take
I think there's
the
an
Shark
immense
Tank guy.
value to everyone who's rational, who's watching from the sidelines, who's trying to figure out, who doesn't know that much, like, am I leftist? Am I right? Like, do I want to even pick a side? But if I do, which way do I want to lean? Like, who do I agree with more? If you have any sort of leanings towards the radical left and Antifa and anarchism and all that sort of thing, I just point to Portland and say, yeah, well, your ideas all got put into play there without the natural conservative opposition that exists in most cities and places. You finally had your own way, and it was an utter disaster.
Well, even more so is there's one of the guys from Shark Tank, right? Multi-millionaire, right? Huge amounts of money.
Not the Canadian, please.
No. He goes like this,
Okay.
right? He says, and he was talking about San Francisco. He said, there is no businessman that will invest in San Francisco right now with how absolutely terrible San Francisco is
Correct.
being ran.
He's absolutely correct. All the businesses are leaving.
Right. So what you're seeing now, and I think this is a good thing, and where are they all going? Texas, Florida, Tennessee. They're going
to places that are the opposite of where they left, which is absolutely rational. You're leaving a place that you were doing, like, there's money in this.
Oh
place.
yeah, there's huge money.
You are making good bank here. It's not a problem of the economic environment, it's a problem of the political environment, because they allow open theft without punishment or jail. So it's completely rational that you're a business that's leaving that environment. You're going to look for the opposite of that. Well, where's the place in America where that's never going to happen to me again?
Texas.
Yeah, Tennessee, Texas, exactly.
Well, and now here's the problem in Texas is we've been 100%. Look at Houston. Houston is turned into like the San Francisco in Texas. And Houston,
I never hear Texans say good things about Houston
or Austin.
Houston, yeah, same thing, yeah.
So, the two cities the leftists have taken over are crime riddled now, and sorry, that doesn't happen.
It's such a pattern. It's such a pattern. I mean, Biden just shafted the Democratic Party a week ago by not vetoing that crime amendment bill in Washington D.C. like all the Democrats expected him to, but he couldn't do it because the bill lowered the punishment for carjacking, despite the fact that carjacking had gone up over the last 2 years in D.C. by like 117% or something like that. It was crazy. So it's just like, that's obviously the wrong response. There's an increase in a type of serious crime. Oh, we better lower the punishment
because you will fill up the jail.
That's literal. But I mean, just think about when your policy position can literally be described that way, and that's not a straw man. Like, it's a simplification, but it's not an oversimplification. It's just the simplest expression of the base principle that's operative within your policy.
Okay, so we can get
and that's literal. It's like, that tells you that something's wrong, because that is that, like, inductively and deductively, that is inverse from rationality. That literally makes no sense if making no sense makes any sense. You know what I mean?
So now we kind of went down that rabbit hole of the city life compared to
I guess I should get to my stuff.
The country life. So
that was a good point, though. I mean, regions really differ.
And that it was really a brilliant thing
I think
to
the
observe.
ideal right now is to be raised in the country,
With
move in the
country
city
and bring
once,
your values there.
yeah, and bring your country values and your hard work ethic into the city from the ages of like 20 to whenever you've made enough money,
To leave again.
and then you leave again. Yeah, and your goal is always
To
to
go
leave
back.
again.
Yeah.
You go to the money, extract
Your
resources and
share.
wealth, your share, and however much more you can get, because that's how capitalism, and then you leave.
Okay, so what did you learn in your 20s, ML, that profoundly changed you?
The biggest one for me was a physical one where I started getting into physical fights with grown men, as opposed to like scraps as a teen and as a kid. And when you start fighting as a grown man, the first thing I learned, like right away, it was immediate, was that I think that you just have this. I don't know. I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for a lot of people where there's a lot of us who don't have experience, like real experience with hardcore physical violence. Once you get there, because as soon as you start fighting strangers as an adult in the street, that's pretty hardcore. Like that can escalate so quickly to death, even in Western countries. It's stupid to do, but I did it a few times, and I got my ass kicked. And that taught the first lesson that getting my ass kicked taught me was that my anger didn't give me superpowers or super strength or anything like that. Because I was so mad. I was so angry at the guy, and he wasn't that mad at me, and he utterly ragdolled me. I couldn't
You
I
got
couldn't do
donked, huh?
anything. Oh yeah, he was half again my age and strength and size and weight, and he had experience fighting, and I didn't. All I had was my anger, and I thought that would be enough. And no, no, it wasn't. It didn't. It didn't really do anything. And that was a real, like, it was a real come to Jesus moment in terms of just like I really thought I was so angry at him. I really thought I was just gonna like pick him up off the ground, and yeah, no, that didn't happen.
John
Quite
Wayne.
quite the opposite.
John Wayne in one of there's a movie called Big Jake, and his son was played by one of his sons actually. And when he got off the train, and they're like, "Hi, Daddy," and John Wayne's just looking at him. He just keeps calling him, "Okay, Daddy." And Wayne looked at him and he goes, and he punches him in the mouth, by the way, and knocks him clean off his horse. And he goes, "Boy."
John Wayne punched the kid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He goes, "You'll either respect your elders or your betters." And that's the lesson you learned. And that's
Yeah, I mean,
such an
there's a
old lesson. Like, you mess with the bull, you get the horn. You know, that rite of passage, I believe every man at some point learns that, yeah, just because you're angry about something and you've got a rage that's you feel you can't control, there's somebody that's a little older, a little wiser, and a whole lot more cunning than you and physically violent that will really alter that perception. And
I'm sharing it on my screen right now. So this is this is a documentary about Khabib Nurmagomedov, arguably the most dominant mixed martial artist, certainly of the last decade, who was raised in Dagestan uh, in a very strict Muslim environment. And yeah, his words: "It's shameful to offend the father or an elder. If you're punished, it means you deserved it." And it's just like, yeah,
right.
like that's it's just we in the West really kind of lose sight of the fact that most of the world is still traditional, is not Western. And there's another one here. This is translation. There were a lot of punishments. I said to the father that I didn't want to study. He punished. When he explained to me with words, I didn't understand. With the fists, I understood immediately. So that's Khabib talking about being raised by his father.
Yeah.
His father is a. This is a picture of Khabib's father, mixed martial arts legend in Russia and Dagestan, considered the father of mixed martial arts in Dagestan. His school has trained 20 MMA world champions, and the guy himself is a bit of a legend and built like a beast. And you just get the feeling looking at that guy. It's like, yeah, you step out of line, you're
You're
getting
gonna
your
get smacked.
fucking bell rung by a grown ass man with a big beefy paw. So you're probably not going to do it much.
Did you have that come to Jesus moment there, legit? I know I did.
Yeah, yeah. Being on a couple of the jobs I had where you're a roofer, everybody thinks they're a hard ass, and I'm a little dude anyway. But yeah, the short guy syndrome goes away pretty quick. When,
Let me tell you, man, the hardest I ever got frickin' rolled was by guys shorter than me. The best fights I ever had were against guys a lot larger than me. I did really well against guys that were like 6'4", 6'5". It was the guys who were like between 5'8" and 5'10", with thick wrists, wide shoulders, and no gut. And usually, like, it was always the same. It's like you talk to them afterwards. Oh yeah, they always wrestled a bit in high school and maybe a bit in college. Those guys, I couldn't fucking handle those guys. Those guys just absolutely ragdolled me. I learned pretty quick. Guys that have that build, I give a lot of respect to, because they were like always faster than me, with a lower center of gravity. And I think like that short guy thing, like short guys get picked on, and they like you just have to fucking you have to learn how to you have to toughen up and defend yourself. I think when you're a shorter guy, big guys can get around. Like you see, oh god, it was such. That's I think why I did better against big guys. I remember when I fought a guy who was 6'6" in a park, and it ended up just being kind of a draw. We exhausted each other without really being able to hurt each other that much, just rolling around on the ground. But I was shocked because I was just like, you should have been able to absolutely you're 3/4 again my mass. How the hell did this? But it's just because he didn't really know how to fight. And every time I fought a guy who was shorter and smaller than me, that dude knew how to fight way better than me.
Well, they had
every
to.
single fucking time because they have to. Yeah,
Right. So I
big
didn't
guys
actually.
could just bluff their way through life with their size, and yeah.
Well, a good friend of mine who passed away, Kenny. Kenny was 7 feet tall, 404 pounds. So to say Kenny was bigger than me is kind of like the grossest understatement
He's
in the
bigger
history of the
than
world.
most people. That's like in your top 0.01% of size.
So Kenny and Kenny had a black belt in Tang Sudo, and I was working out with him, teaching him a couple of different martial arts that I'm quite skilled in. And there are things that you don't think about when you do the martial arts and you practice and you're used to practicing with people that are comparably built to you, right? I'm 6'2", and at the time I was like 220. So I by no means was a small man. But like I got him, I took Kenny and I put him in a reverse naked choke that you kind of put your hip in their small of their back to break their stance so that they can't fight you. You take their power away. The problem was it didn't occur to me that I couldn't hold 400 fucking pounds on my hip and support him. Like part of that maneuver requires you to support that person's body weight. Well,
I tried to hip throw a 320-pound man hip toss.
How'd that go?
And not very well. Turns out that he wrestled in high school, so all he did was just set his weight down,
Done.
and then he actually threw me over his head, and I landed on my ass, stunned on my tailbone in front of him, and he slapped on the rear naked, and that was it. I tapped over. GG. That was in the coat closet of the IHOP. A fight broke out, and I lost because I had hip tossed a couple of guys that were bigger than me before, but not that much bigger. And he also knew how to shift his weight properly to counter because he had wrestled. So yeah, I couldn't do it. No, stupid. I'll never do that again.
So one day we were moving. My friend Ken was helping me, and my neighbor, who was not as tall as Kenny, he was about 2 inches taller than me, but he worked out like he was a monster. He was a gym rat. Like, dude was, he benched 550, like that kind of guy. He's huge. And they were all talking shit, and I went to snap. Yeah, they all know I'm skilled at fighting. So I went to grab my boy because he was messing with me, and Kenny just grabbed me. He swallowed me up, lifted me in the air as if I weren't there, And my other big friend accomplished both of my feet in a moment. And I'm like, I'm helpless. Like,
Yeah.
I'm legitimately helpless. I
The
can't
first
break
time you're
free.
legit helpless on the hands of another
Male?
man,
Yeah, you
it's a
just,
shocking moment.
because, like, they could literally have just fucking picked me up
Kill you.
together and slammed me into the concrete, and that's done. Like,
Yeah,
there's,
you're
I'm
either
done.
dead or crippled. Yeah,
Or,
it's
or
over.
I'm knocked the fuck out. But that is a extraordinarily humbling experience, and that was the first time I had ever really been bested. Like,
Yeah,
up
and
until
your
that
anger, it
point,
doesn't matter
no,
like
I was
what
just like,
emotional state you get into. That doesn't change the fact that
they
they have
had
that
me.
grip on you,
Yeah,
and
I was done. And
you're
I
done. Yeah,
that's dude, that is a come to Jesus moment, as it were. You immediately go, okay, yeah, because I think every guy has a Superman complex, right? I'll save you, da, da, da. Like that's every guy in the world. That's we
and you
all.
think you can do it
Oh yeah,
until
supreme
you
belief.
actually try once
Yeah,
and realize that other men aren't NPCs in a comic book that are just
no,
gonna like let you knock them over. Like, no, they're protagonists in their own story, and they're trying to win just
yeah.
as much as you.
So that was a good one, ML. So now I'm gonna do over 40.
Right.
So for me, one of the things that has profoundly changed me over 40, and I'm going to give some credit to ML, was my introduction to Jordan Peterson. Um, and that was the byproduct of you. And I had never really considered, my brother got his degree in philosophy and psychology and sociology, etc. So, me and my brother talked a lot, but I never really pursued any of the information personally. And when I started listening to Peterson, and then I went down that rabbit hole across multiple platforms of thought process, Simon Sinek, Jordan Peterson, Andy Andrews, Sam Harris at
I, I
one
put
point.
I put deeper conservative thinkers, just like that. It's like discovering that, oh my goodness, there are people who think like you do, and
Can
but who are
articulate it.
yeah, but who are clearly smarter, and can articulate it better, and you can just listen to them and like copy what they say in their ideas because they don't own them either. It's like, especially if they're conservative, it's always a rehash of stuff that other people have thought from. It's always rediscovering what's been lost. I mean,
And that was going to be my point, is that it's not that it was just Jordan or it was just this guy or this guy or this guy, and it was one of those things where I have always had my own ethos on what I believed a man should be, how a man should behave, and I've always had the desire to best everyone around me, whether it be intellectually, whether it be physically, financially, at work. I hated being. If I wasn't number one, I was fucking mad. Like, it was a problem if I wasn't at the top of the sales board every fucking month. If I didn't have the biggest paycheck, I was mad. Like, I took a personal offense anytime I was second, because to me that's a failure. At least how I used to think. And because I always compared myself to everyone else around me. So any environment I was in, I had to be the best. I had to be, because I grew up with the idea as a kid that I wasn't worth anything, because I was told as a kid and as a young man growing up that I'd never amount to anything. You're a useless this, useless that, and you suck, and you're terrible, and nobody's gonna love you. Like, so I had such the 180-degree drive of what people told me I was going to be, that I pursued relentlessly success in everything I did, and I used the best at whatever there was out there for me to aim at. I'm going to beat that guy. I'll outsell that guy. I'm going to make more money than that guy. I want to make more money than the fucking managers do. Like, that was
Yeah.
that was my drive from like 23 to late 30s. My ego drove everything, and until I got introduced to Peterson, then I realized I was measuring myself against the wrong metrics.
Right. Yeah, he's
And
really
my
good at
happiness
that.
was not going to derive from beating the people around me, but from becoming a better version of me. And
Beating the people around you is fine, but it's an end, or sorry, it's a means to an end. It's not the end.
there's no
Like the deep meaning,
yeah, there's no
Peterson, I'm
meaning in
sure
it.
would say, well, there's meaning in it, but it's because the meaning in it comes from the greater thing that it's supplying. You're doing that not for the doing of it itself. You're doing that because that provides value and wealth to what actually provides you the real deep meaning in your life, which is your family.
Right. So that's probably the biggest thing I can say to somebody who's under 40 is to preview you as the metrics. Like that compare yourself to who you were yesterday and who somebody else is today is such a brilliant way of stating, you know nothing about me and everything about you. You're the best measurement, And the good part of that is it becomes a lifelong pursuit. It's never a temporary pursuit because you'll never be the best version of you. It's not plausible. You're not Jesus, right? So, that being the case, it's an endless chore, but it's one that I believe, when pursued and pursued with honesty and culpability, meaning that you hold yourself accountable for your success and failure because there's nobody else. Like everything happens because of you, not to you. Occasionally something will happen to you, but that's the rare instance, not the norm. If you consider, like, I got hit on my motorcycle, okay? There was a guy in front of me and a guy behind me. That happened to me. I didn't make that woman run a stop sign, not look both ways, and run into me. That isn't any my doing, unless I just didn't ride a motorcycle that day. That'd have been the only thing I could have done to prevent that. But that happened to me. But 99% of my life has happened because of me, good or bad. And I think that's the challenge that we have as a young man, is we think bad things happen to us and good things happen because of us. And it's never the case that it's uh, to us on most of the time.
And it's usually not that simple. And deserve usually doesn't have much to do with it.
Oh, no
You lose
shit.
you lose a lot of your idealism when you start to age. You're just like, oh man, well that guy should have won that. That guy was the better man, and he got screwed over royally, and nothing prevented that or changed it.
And the thing you start to realize, and I'm sure you probably have had a similar experience, ML, with the impact Peterson has had on you personally.
Yeah, I mean he was part of I'm writing
But I
I've been
remembered you when you first
writing a letter
discovered
about
him,
this.
right? I remember when you first talked about Peterson. You gave up video games for a while because you wanted to
Well,
work
I
on
mean,
you. Like again,
I was in a bit of a lull from video games, anyways. I think that was when I was quitting League. Like they were video games became pretty toxic for me, and um, I was starting to be self-aware at that point. So I could notice that like I would have a bad couple of games of League of Legends before going to work, and then I'd have a really shitty day at work, and that was consistently happening, and I made that connection pretty quickly that, oh, if I have a bad series of games, I go to work in a bad mood, and I have a bad day at work. Like I fight with my coworkers, or I have a bad call, or I fight with my boss. Like something happens, and I'm clearly being I'm taking that negative energy state from the game into work, and it shouldn't follow me because I shouldn't care that much about a game, and that's where I realized that's why I'd love to go back to League of Legends sometime, but if I did, I'd only ever go back as a filthy casual because like never again. It's just you'd have to pay me. But yeah, Peterson really was. What I like about Peterson is that, and it's still this way with him and me, is I've always disagreed with about roughly 50% of what he said, and then I've agreed with about 50% of what he said, and found the parts that I do agree with him, like he's saying it in a way that's much more eloquent and inevitably phrased than I am. So that's really inspiring and useful. And the things he's saying that I don't agree with, well, he's representing. He's usually representing, not so with his atheist takes are really crap, but a lot of his takes that I disagree with, he represents the take and the position very well. And so even though I disagree with it, it's like a challenge, and I have to I have to rise to the challenge, and I have to either to to counter what he's saying with evidence and argument, or I have to admit that he's making a compelling case, and I have to at least, if not immediately change my views, I at least have to put them on the block and start kind of poking around with them. And he
That's
definitely
really hard.
did that with it is really hard. I can name one specific, like the big moment or the big change where I can, like, people are always like, when's the last time you admitted you were wrong about something? And well, it's not the last time, but I know like a big thing I was wrong about that Peterson corrected me on was I was still kind of taking stuff from my angry atheist days, and it had never occurred to me that, like, if somebody had asked me before Peterson, do you ultimately think that the expulsion and removal of the religious substructure to Western society was a good thing, I would say, oh yeah, sure, yeah, overwhelmingly positive. There'll be a few little hiccups, but it'll be fine. Ask me that after Peterson, and I'm like, was it a good thing? No. Was it a necessary thing? Maybe. Did we do it well? Hell no. Are we experiencing massive negative consequences because of it now? Hell yes. So my position changed quite radically. Not only was I not concerned about the removal of the religious substructure from our culture and society in the West, I just openly I was like, yeah, not positive, didn't even really think about it. After Peterson, it's a thing I think about so much, because I'm not some conservative who's advocating for a return to that exact same, like, oh, we just put the substructure back. I'm like, well, no, I mean, but the one thing I do know is that we took away the substructure and we didn't replace it with anything useful and ubiquitous that just takes up the load. And the whole structure is crumbling now, to complete the metaphor. So if at the end of the day it's a choice between we return the religious substructure of, say, the 1940s and 50s to our culture and society through whatever means are necessary, or our society crumbles into anarchy, chaos, murder, and
Malevolence.
utter disorder, and just the rule of tooth and claw, red and fang, then I would say, okay, fine, I guess I'll just like go be a Jew or a Christian or something.
Where's the church at?
Well, it's like believing in, like, paying lip service to some Bronze Age myths that I don't really believe in, for the purpose of maintaining the wonder that is our modern society. If it came to that, as a rational atheist, I would be like, yeah, where's the church? Like, that's fine. In my heart, you're never going to convince me, but that's fine, because if God exists, he can see into my heart. Like, I have nothing to hide, because
Right.
hiding isn't a thing. You can't do it. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where, but I think there's a better way. And I think, and this is where I'm charitable to Peterson, where his critics are not. I think what Peterson is trying to do is he's like a new myth maker. He is trying to create a new substructure to replace what was torn away in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and the Lost Generation and all that, and then the rise of postmodernism. He's trying to shore up that foundation, but he's trying to do it with, as far as I can tell, he's trying to do it with that old religious substructure, but strained through a mesh of, like, of modern secular science and psychology and literary theory.
He's presenting the same data without the faith-based requirement.
Well, he's trying to do something that Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, of course, wrote the Jeffersonian Bible, which is a profoundly heretical document that no church would house. But he was more of a deist, so he believed now. I mean, someone can come and correct me with his letters or whatever, but as far as I know, he was a deist, so he believed in an impersonal God. He believed that the universe was too ordered to have no God. He's like, well, clearly some kind of intelligent, conscious entity designed the universe, but he did not think he didn't buy the whole Christ thing, and that entity would be interested in people. So he attempted to. Well, he didn't attempt. He did. He rewrote the Bible, the New Testament, taking out all the stuff that he considered to be not unimportant. He wanted to focus on the moral truths that existed within the Bible. He considered that the real value and meat of the Bible, which is actually like I can understand where he's coming from, and I like using his framing and perspective. I agree with him. Like I get where what he was doing. I think it was noble in effort. Christians don't tend to like it because it denies the resurrection, but basically what he was doing was being like the closest that you could be to an atheist, because they still burned atheists in that day. He was being an atheist, but he was actually holding the Bible with respect. Even though he rejected its mythological components, he was such a god. He was smart, a true polymath, a true genius, because like we all didn't do what he did. He reject all of us atheists. He, as an atheist, or at least a deist, rejected the mythology of the Bible, but he did not reject its moral wisdom. He actually valued it so much that he wanted to extract it from the mythology, which is something that is so rational to do, and yet most atheists I know, like, that would be the last thing they would ever consider doing. But there isn't a rational reason for it. It's because I think deep down at the heart of most angry atheists is this idea that religion is purely parasitic,
and
that
oppressive.
yeah, that it's always just sat as this oppressive thing that just yeah, like it by
Rob you of
parasitic
your
I mean
joy.
yeah, by parasitic I mean it contributes nothing and takes. All it does is take, it doesn't give. And I'm just like, it's not, it's so implausible that that could happen across all of human timescales, across all of human populations across the world, that they could all spontaneously, because they weren't communicating with each other, so this is just spontaneously developing everywhere. And you're telling me that it's purely parasitic?
Yeah, not
No,
possible.
no, it's clearly an emergent property. I mean, it's clearly our first attempts at science. We're trying to explain the world. We're
Okay,
trying to make coherent sense out of things, and you know,
legit. Your
yeah.
take at 40, what was one thing that profoundly changed you at 40? You pr-
Profoundly changed me at 40.
Something that changed your way you operate. And if you
Well,
haven't had an experience yet, that's okay too.
I don't know if there's really anything I could say that was profoundly changing the way that I behave or operate on a daily basis when I turned 40. Um, the whole political atmosphere, started coming around when I was still in my 30s. So, I can't say that it was the politics of everything. It just I would say at that point in time, it was just the realization of how absolutely corrupt everything has become throughout the world that changed all my thinking, and that was through, you know, 38 to 42 area is, it changed all my thinking about, how I see my community, how I view my work ethics, how I view, you know, just about every aspect of my life, realizing that man, we are just being so lied to about so many things at so many different levels, and there's really nothing you can do about it.
You became
And I
aware
think
of the
that,
benevolence of the world.
yeah, I would say that would be a good explanation of it. I mean, I always kind of knew that things were off, and that we weren't being completely let in on all of the things that were going on. And I've had my share of failures, and I've been in jail a few times, and so I've got a record, and none of that stuff really. You'd think that would change a person, and of course it does. But to be a profound change, I quit drinking when I was early 30s. Um, I never really been big into drugs or anything like that. So, I mean, occasional smoke a joint or something with somebody, that ain't nothing in my book. But the most profound thing I think was realizing that the world we live in is more malevolent than what you really, you
Want to
know,
admit.
That's
yeah,
definitely congruent with my thinking. I mean, probably in
yeah,
vastly different terms of what we think about the actual world and how it's organized, but in terms of like the more I think about um, humanity as a whole, the less good it looks for individual humans. That's for sure.
And Jordan is literally preaching the opposite, that it all starts with the individual getting better. And I think he's right
Yes,
there.
and he's correct. Oh, he's absolutely correct. Yeah.
So what is the thing that
yeah.
changed you there, ML?
I'm still having difficulty. I'm still like going through it, but it's like something that hopefully I'm going to be um, constantly exhibiting in these conversations is just something I call frame shifting, and it's like I've done this with you a bunch. I'm an atheist, but I seem to be pretty adept at like I don't know coming up with theories like theological theories that intelligent Christians find theologically interesting, despite the fact that I'm an atheist. And it's because I'm not. It's because I'm operating within the Christian rule set, and I'm doing it genuinely. I'm not doing it as like a secret atheist that's trying to find ways to to make it all fall apart or prove it's wrong. I'm doing it as like, oh, just imagine I'm a Christian and this is the rule set that I operate by. And then I seem to be pretty good at. I'm getting better and better at doing that and producing outcomes in terms of like my ideas and words that actual practitioners of the rule set, so either like religious people or conservatives or like ideology, like political stuff, like leftists, like I can talk to leftists and get along with them so well because all I do is just adopt a leftist rule set and just talk about and just say things that are still true to me. So I'm that way all I'm doing is basically finding the common ground. I'm not going to adopt a leftist rule set and then say something that is false to like my innate logic and rationality. But using their rule sets, that allows me to certainly understand why they've come to certain conclusions. Like I understand why and I really understand. Like in that I can argue, and I think this would be the proof. The proof is when you can argue that ideology or rule set as well, if not better, where you can defend it better than people who actually believe it. Then I know of no stronger indication to show that you really empathize, like you really understand that argument, even if you don't agree with it, you understand it. If you can argue it well enough that you're arguing it better than people who actually believe it. Yeah. And and that's just something that I've developed. I think like Peterson, I think was part of the start of that. Um, and I'm getting to the point now where it just feels like I'm using it at work a lot. Where before I'd be really frustrated that my boss wouldn't see my point of view on something. But then I started to think more about the outcomes of what I wanted from situations rather than being right. That was another thing. That was actually, oh, you know what? I'll focus more on that because it's less esoteric. So here, I'll write it down too. So my stepdad, who's like ultra successful millionaire, um, he drops these gems. He doesn't know they're gems, which is kind of cool. But he just drops these gems, and one he dropped on me was he said you need to think more about what you want from a situation. You need to define your desired outcomes and focus on that more. And that was like I got promoted like 6 months after he said that. I mean, that was like life changing because I was so focused always on just my own rule set and my frame, and I'm right, and I need to make you come into my frame and see things from my perspective, so then you'll understand that I'm right. And I would get really frustrated with people. And once I started focusing on outcomes, I started noticing that even though I feel right and I felt like I've defended my position really well, I'm not getting promoted. I'm not getting more money. I'm not getting the real life outcomes that I want out of people. I feel like I've won the argument, whatever that means, but there's no actual IRL positive outcome from that. And as a pragmatist, when someone tells me I should focus more on pragmatic outcomes, obviously that rings a bell with me. It's like, oh shit, yeah, I probably should. As soon as I started focusing on that, I was like, oh, well, if I want to get, clearly, people don't work via, I just present a more conclusive argument, counter argument to what they're trying and thinking to get me to do. They rationally analyze it and go, oh, you're right, I'll stop. You've convinced me. Said nobody ever. People don't work that way.
Right, I know.
And that's not how human compulsion works. So I quickly realized that, and I'm like, man, I'm really people don't like me. I'm really abrasive. I'm having all the as I
You're
realized
self-aware.
Well, yeah, and it became it. I was forced into it when I started thinking about getting the outcomes that I wanted, which is ironically selfish. But the best way I've found to get outcomes that you want from people who don't necessarily want to give it to you is to be able to show them that you understand their point of view. And the best way that you can really demonstrate that is to articulate phrases or arguments that support their point of view and that are actually better than any they've ever heard of.
Well, so I'm going to expound on that for a second.
It's such a slam dunk when you can do that, and that's something I've just started developing in my 40s, and I'm like, oh, all in on that. That's working so good, and people like me more when I do that. It's like,
so
okay.
I'm going to expound on your discovery.
A sociopath learns.
Right. I'm going to expound on your discovery, and then I'm going to wrap up today. I'm trying to keep our discussions to about an hour, unless it's something we can really dive into, and we've got a lot to say
and this
on.
one's been nice and structured too. It's good.
Right. So the expounding on that, and this is coming from a way different perspective than your stepfather, is I have spent a lifetime in sales, and I have trained hundreds and hundreds of salespeople. And one of the things that I teach my salespeople to consider is salesmanship is nothing other than influence. Okay? You're trying to influence the outcome of a decision. And the only way to do that is if both parties get something from it. And if you're attempting to force someone to do something against their will via negotiation, you 100% firm their belief in what they have. If you attack what they believe or desecrate what they think, you drive them even farther into their belief. But if you can tell them what they believe in a manner that they can recognize, they then feel heard. It's the same thing when somebody's in a deal. This is one of the jobs I had in the
We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, we are, absolutely.
You're talking colloquially. Yep. What you're talking about is what I mean by rule set. Yeah, it's the same thing.
So one of the things that I have responsibilities for as an internet director and sales manager in the dealership I was in was when there was a customer on fire from service. And what I mean on fire is, in a big dealership, when you have a problem in service, you walk out in the middle of the showroom and start yelling, "Who's the manager? They are trying to fuck me." And 100% of the time, there's going to be somebody fucking screaming across the room to stop you from yelling. because there's about 50 people trying to buy a car, and that'll ruin every deal in the showroom. So, customers on fire was my task. And if you've ever been to a service center and you feel like you're getting fucked or something didn't get done or took too long, the thing you really want is to be heard, genuinely heard, and someone to take an interest in your problem and attempt to solve it. So, one of the things that I learned to do from that task is I had to learn to set the expectations of the outcome, right? So when you started talking about outcome, this thought appeared in my head. So you were focusing on the outcome you wanted. So one of the things I would do is say, okay, Mr. Customer, I can't guarantee you're going to be happy with the outcome of this discussion. But what I can guarantee you is I'm going to hear you make sure that I understand your plight, and then I'm going to investigate the other side. And then from there, I believe we can come to an agreeable, amicable solution to the problem. So I set the expectations up front that we're going to agree. And I also set the expectations up front that it may not be what you want. And that is something that you're learning is that by winning, you weren't getting what you actually wanted. But by learning to,
Correct. That's the best way of
yeah,
putting it. By winning, I was not getting what I wanted.
no.
That's perfect. That's yeah.
And
I'm gonna write that down.
I'm going to use something I tell a lot of young men that are newly married that is such true, and it is true everywhere. The joke of if you beat your wife in an argument, what did you win?
Yeah, it's a.
So if you
I haven't had a wife, but all my girlfriends have been long term and live in, and yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah.
and if you
Don't
beat your
don't go to bed
boss,
mad.
right? If you beat your boss, what did you win? If you beat your coworker, what did you win?
It's not about the beating; it's about how did you win, and that's what I didn't. I didn't
That's
care
it.
about how I was
Yep.
winning. I didn't care that I was winning, but I was. I'm not socially blind. I could tell that people were getting upset with me, but I was just dismissing that as their reaction to their emotional reaction to being proven wrong and
And
wrong.
that
And
was
going,
their
no one
problem,
likes
not
that.
yours.
That's right. And it's like it turns out that
It
when
is your
they're in
problem.
control of my future, and when I'm trying to get something out of them that I
Uh-huh.
want, it is my problem. Yeah.
And they've got a long memory on being made to look stupid.
And it's it's not the it's it's not the no it, like it's I don't know how to phrase this, but it's to know something intellectually, but then to just like know it on a level that's operant within you. They're two different things
It,
because if you anyone could have come up to me and told me that at any point in my life, and I'd be like, yeah, I
yeah,
fucking
whatever.
know that, and it wouldn't have made any
Nope.
impact. But then when something change when it really clicks inside of you and starts to change you at at the level of behavior, then all of a sudden you're just like, Jesus, why was I so fucking dense about
I'll
this?
give
Like
you an analogy that'll make sense. It's the difference between theoretical knowledge and applicable knowledge. You might know the
yeah,
theory of
sure.
business. You might be a business professor, a dean of business. But if you've never gone and knocked on somebody's door, said, "Hi, I'm Brian. Do you have a minute to speak?" "Oh, awesome. Let me tell you about this widget that I think you need to buy." Right? If you've never had that level of rejection and long term rejection for one success, right? You can have the theory of it and never the ability to accomplish it. And that's kind of what you were going through is that you understood the mental understanding that, yeah, if I'm addicted to these people, they're not going to help me in the future, but I beat them because they were wrong and I fucking proved it. I bested
Yeah,
them.
and it's such a I remember how I used to think like that as a young man with a racing brain, and just I really thought that everything that like everything could be figured out theoretically, and um yeah, I mean I'm just gonna quote famous American scientist Richard Feynman, who was involved in the Challenger disaster, the the Challenger space shuttle disaster investigation in the 80s, and one of his final lines that he wrote is, "For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled." And this is, to me, really underlines everything. You can prove something as much as you want theoretically in your head, but until you subject that theory to experiment in the real world, or at least in a lab to something, until you subject it to reality, you don't know.
Yep.
You do not know. It is, and it just, we, time and time and time and time again, reality turns out to be far more complicated than the synthesis that we make in our heads. And yeah, I mean, and wisdom, I think wisdom is intelligence
With
and
application.
theory tested over time with application, which is why wisdom is correlated with age, because it takes actual time to test our theories
Yeah.
against reality, not just once, but to test them well enough that we can actually have um, some confidence in the conclusions. And this is why I think that wisdom comes, it doesn't come to everyone with age, because some people never learn.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why there's very few wise young people is it's not their fault. They literally haven't had enough time to run the experiments.
Yeah.
All they are is theory and idealism, so of course they're going to be wrong about a bunch of things. It's not their fault.
So, in conclusion, all of what we have learned, I know you've been writing it down, so I'll actually let.
Just some notes, yeah.
So, throw your notes out and then I'll close. Because your notes are usually good.
Oh, well, I mean, so this is just a summation.
Yep, that's what I was asking for. Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I just have, like, for myself, for my profound moment at 20 was anger doesn't give me superpowers or super strength. Profound moment at 40 is just what we're being talked about, kind of like learning to think about, like, by winning I wasn't getting what I wanted. And one of the things I thought about is, like, redefining what winning means. I realized that winning, for me, for anyone, like, your personal view of what winning a situation is totally up to you. You can define it however you want. You don't have to define it how others want. And there's real freedom to that. It's not self-deception. It's completely arbitrary anyways, so you might as well do it to your advantage. So mean in terms of what you were, your big epiphany at 20, work ethic matters. You know this intellectually, but you started to see it when you put it into practice. Doing more than the other guy increases personal income, and you got that advice from an older gentleman or mentor, which I think is a recurring theme throughout all of this, as I did with the, focusing
Your stepdad.
on outcomes from my stepdad. Yep. And for you at 40, I have that, exposure to Jordan Peterson and deeper conservative thinkers. You started to think about thinking, which is called meta-thinking, which is the beginning of self-knowledge and conscious self-discipline, as opposed to unconscious self-discipline. So now you're being disciplined, but it's not just because you have an innate work ethic that was instilled into you. It's also because you're self-aware, so you're noticing yourself doing it, which is good, because then you can really take pride in the moment, like, I'm doing it right. This is what I should be doing. So that's all good. Legit Empire, his one at 20 was, at first I thought of it anodyne, but actually unfolded into, there was probably the most in that of any of them, which is that regions differ in terms of job opportunities. Away from the city, there are far less opportunities, and so there's so much to unpack in that can almost be its own topic because of how true that is. And then at 40, money isn't everything, which is absolutely true. That you start to, it's funny, I think once you start to hit your 40s as a man, you start to have enough money where you're not so desperate about money that you can start to actually calm down and think, like, longer term, less panicky about, like, deep meaning and deeper forms of happiness than just like eating a cookie or something. Money doesn't buy happiness. Somebody said money doesn't buy happiness. What it does is it alleviates the most pressing and obvious negative conditions of being poor. And I think that distinction is really important. It's not that money buys happiness. It's that it if you are desperate for money, there are a few situations worse than that in the Western world than being horribly broke, in poverty, in debt, feeling like you can never get out of it. So getting money in that sense is a massive alleviation of all that stress. But alleviating stress isn't happiness, and it certainly isn't deep
That
happiness.
that's
So
like
yeah, I
yeah,
think money isn't everything is true. Once you get into your 40s and you've started to accumulate, you've started to hit your stride as a man, you're starting to draw resources to you. That's when you start to realize, like, I have way more money now than I do in my 20s, but I'm not just like magically happy. It's just I'm not worrying about those money situations that worried me in my 20s. The lack of that worry doesn't just magically replace it with deep meaning and happiness. You have to build that.
so Sean Eichhorn wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, and I'm going to quote him from a line from the book, and it just encapsulates what you're saying so well. And he said it like this: the absence of sickness is not health. So once you take
Correct.
away,
There you go. Boom. That does it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because you
that's
can
it.
be not sick, but that doesn't mean that you're fit.
Correct. So
Yeah.
the same thing with once you have your basic necessities, that doesn't mean you're good and you're happy. It just means you're not going to die from starvation and privation. So the absence of sickness isn't health, and just like the absence of poverty isn't wealth, right? So I think that that's a pretty profound thing to end on. Is that
Here, I'll bring one more thing into
shoot?
the because that links to, so this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and from the bottom being the most basic, to the top being the most sophisticated and the highest. And so, yes, physiological. That's like food, shelter, safety, obviously. Then you get into some things like belonging and love. So that's like having a loving mother, loving father, having people around you that care about you. That leads to esteem. That's self-love. And then you get cognitive, and which is, what would you call that? That's like the need for us to, like become better, to
Self
enrich
improvement.
ourselves, self improvement. Aesthetic. This is our need to experience, I would say, joy through like art, music, that sort of thing. Self actualization. This is the need to improve ourselves and to, I think, more specifically, to know ourselves, and ultimately transcendence. And the purpose of the pyramid is to illustrate that you cannot get to the top if you don't have the stuff at the bottom. So if you are in a constant state of worrying about your physical safety, so like say you've been, you're in Mexico and you somehow end up in jail, in a Mexican jail, you are not going to be working on, like, you're not going to have any sort of a need for anything other than safety. You are not going to be capable of self-actualization or any sort of transcendence as long as you are not having your need for safety met.
It's the precondition.
Yes. So the pyramid, like the base of the pyramid, everything builds up on top of that, and you see a lot of humanity in worn, torn areas and stuff like that. We sit in our comfort in the West, working on like cognitive, aesthetic, self-actualization, and transcendence because we're so comfortable, and we see people, who are in these war-torn areas where they've never known safety, belonging, and love, and we see them acting a way different from us, and we're like, oh, why don't they just act this way? And it's like, oh, they can't.
Yeah.
They can't. It's not possible. And if we were in that situation, we would know it.
So
But anyways,
in closing, I'm going to make a positive note, as that was true, but not very happy. Um,
well, I mean, it should be. It's like the happiness, I think, comes from the realization that there is a path, and that it's possible. I think it's possible to be in negative conditions so profound that we can forget
and that,
that.
honestly, I'm
that
gonna.
we can get out of it.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, and this is going to be a great close. Religion does that. It gives you faith that you
It's one
can.
of the ways.
And that's the thing when
It's
people.
a proven way too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really goes to an interesting way of closing out the things that you discover through the years, and you yourself, being an atheist, you've discovered religion. It has a value proposition, but you don't necessarily yet need the faith aspect of it because you can rationalize its applicable knowledge in your head, and I think that's
Well,
part
I can
of.
build something like I'm sophisticated enough that that I can replace that substructure. Like I can build something out of nihilism. I've built a wonderful ethical structure out of nihilism that does me very well. I've never been to jail. I've never had a parking ticket. I've never hurt anybody. It's I think I'm being a pretty good person, but I took it for granted that that was just what every atheist does and that it was easy. Now I realize that's my own kind of hubris and my own sort of just myopic perspective because I see so many atheists who are not who are struggling so much. There are so many atheists who have gone back to religion because of Jordan Peterson, simply because he's reminding them, as you say, hey, if you're lost and you're looking for a ladder out of the darkness, there is a ladder. It's old, it's well worn, it works.
Yeah.
And if you want it, it is there. And it is called religion. I know at any point that if the darkness is ever too much, I can become religious. Sure, that's in me, and I would be genuine and committed to it. But I don't find the darkness I don't have a problem yet. Maybe one day I will. Maybe as I get closer to death, my future self will really want the surety that comes with that religious structure, and he'll just take it on. I'm not going to make commitments for my future self. I don't know, but the thing I've come to realize more and more is that I think the secularists assumed that every person, once you get rid of religion and you become an atheist, and you face the just implacable darkness of nihilism, that they're all going to be able to come out of that and build a positive structure of beliefs and values equivalent to the one that has been built by human
And
beings
tested.
and tested over all of human civilization and time. No, each individual atheist on their own is going to be able to just whip something up
Makes
equivalent to that. That makes total sense, right?
sense.
No.
Right.
As soon as I thought it, I was like, that makes no fucking sense whatsoever. What have we been doing?
Right.
I'm not surprised lots of atheists are going back to religion because we haven't offered them anything to replace it that's easily digestible. We don't just bootstrap it.
Yeah.
Bootstrap 15 plus thousand years of global human civilization, religious theological effort, and testing, probably the most important thing. Bootstrap all of that by yourself, not using any of that framework. You can't copy it. It has
Nothing
to
can
be
go
secular.
wrong.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah, that'll be great. What could go? Yeah, everyone's totally up to that task. Yeah, well, we're all on antidepressants.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Anyway, thank you guys so much. I so much appreciate you guys spending your time today. I'm gonna call this an interesting topic, and I'm sure we'll.
they're getting better and better. I like how these are going.
Yeah, I agree. I'm enjoying the discussion. Legit. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate your sentiments. You're very much my. You're my. What's the word I want to use? So I'm a Christian, and I'm also very uneducated, but I'm very well read. You grew up in the country, and I grew up in the city, so you bring.
Well, we're forming that. What did Phil say last time? He was talking about. Was it Benjamin Franklin?
Yeah.
One of the founding fathers who
Mhm.
had that group of just dudes from
All
ordinary
over.
walks of life, just all over the place that he would meet with regularly and just talk with them just to get different perspectives. That's basically what we're forming, which
Yeah.
I think is healthy. I think that's what men used to form just in their own little circles everywhere back in the days before the internet, and that just stopped happening. So yeah, I think it needs to start happening again.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you, buddy.
Hey, man. It's all
Yeah,
good. I
thanks for coming.
appreciate both
Legit.
you guys, man. It's always nice to hear some outside of the small community, that I live in, outside thoughts and interesting remarks. Yeah, absolutely.
That's only if someone were to ask me what's my goal for these, like what do I want the listener to get out of it? I'm like, I'm not interested in defining goals for listeners beyond that it doesn't waste their time, that they don't feel like, oh, I'm never gonna, like, that was stupid. Why did I do that? As long as they're not having that feeling, I'm happy. That's good enough.
For me,
After that, it's like it's for them.
just like the thing for me is leave everyone you encounter better than you found them. So
Yeah, if you
my
haven't
hope,
wasted their time,
yep,
by
yep.
definition, you must have left them a bit better. Yeah.
So my hope is that somebody will listen to our discussion and potentially challenge their own belief, not necessarily agreeing with any one of us, but at least considering that what they believe should be questioned.
Yeah, or and if listening to us provokes a challenge to somebody's belief and they address that challenge and come away with the thought that ultimately their belief is correct, well then that has value too. You
Yeah,
tested your
it's
belief a
confirmed
bit
it.
and it's confirmed it a bit and you can have more strength in it. So either way, like I
It's a
don't care
win.
if anyone agrees or disagrees. It's just about like, well, did it make you think? Like, was your
Right.
brain active or were you bored? If you weren't bored and you were actually like and you were engaged, then I think I did my job.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.